All right, here we go. This is the second part of the test preparation questions or test review questions for the state test. So if we're going to look down here at number 7, because we did 5 and 6 on the previous one, it says a chemist is using 349 milliliters of a solution of acid and water. So combining acid and water. 13% of the solution is acid. Okay, so most of it's going to be water, which is good. 13.1% of the solution is acid. How many milliliters of acid are there? Okay, so 13%. It's not going to be very much of it is going to be acid. So if we get a really high number, we know that that's not going to be correct. All right, so the most important thing to remember on this one is if you have 13.1%, you got to change the 13.1 into a decimal, or remember 13.1% is the same thing as 13.1 over 100 because percent means per 100. So if you do 13.1 divided by 100, you're going to end up with 0.131. So you're going to move the decimal over 2 places because there's 2 zeros in 100. And here's your answer. So at this point, once we have this, all we have to do is multiply those two things together, and that is going to give us our answer. So if we have 349 times 0.131, we're going to end up with 45 there's going to be 0.7 something after that, but it says round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so since the next number after the 7 is going to be 4, 3, 2, or 1, so any number below 5 is just going to keep it at 7. So that's the answer. So again, just take the percent, change it to a decimal, okay, by doing this, and then multiply it by the amount. So 13% of that is 45.7 milliliters is the acid, and then all the rest of that is the water. So that's it for number 7. Next, it wants us to translate the phrase into an algebraic expression, which basically means we have letters and numbers combined together with some type of operation, whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. This one makes life real simple because we know since many years ago, we learned that product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So with that being the case, the product of y and 9 can simply be written as 9y, because 9 times y, or right next together to y, is 9 times y. Or we could do y with a dot with as the times 9, or 9 with the dot y. Or you could have 9 and then in parentheses y. That's also multiplication. All of these different things are the same thing, because as you go further and further into algebra, you'll see there are so many different ways that you can show multiplication. You can also put the parentheses around the 9 as well, so they both have parentheses around it, or you can just put a parentheses around the 9 but not the y, but that's all the same thing. Those are all multiplication. Okay, so for number 9, we're just being asked to divide. Okay, and anytime you're dividing by what's called a base 10 number, which would be 10, it could be 100, it could be 1,000, it could be 10,000. Basically, any number where there's a 1 at the beginning and then there's some zeros behind it, those are base 10 numbers. All right, so all you have to do when you're dividing by a base 10 number is just move the decimal to the left however many zeros there are. Okay, the other way you can show this is 99.3 divided by 100 could also be written as 99.3 divided by 100. So at this point, you're just made up a fraction. And then again, you just move it over 2 places because there's the 2 zeros in 100, which simply makes the answer to this one 0.993. Oftentimes people will put a 0 before the point. So you can clearly see that there's a decimal right there, 0.993. So That's how you do that. Make sure that you remember that. Anytime there is a base 10 number that you divide by, just move the decimal however many places to the left. If this was divided by 1,000, we would just move the decimal over 3 places rather than 2 places. Okay, number 10, we're going to look at A. It says, at Smith's Bike Rental, it costs $38 to rent a bike for 8 hours. Now, here's the big kicker. Okay, make sure that we're looking at what they're wanting to know one of. It says, how many dollars does it cost per hour? So we want to get the hours down to 1. We're not trying to get the dollars down to 1. Okay, so it's per hour, which means we're going to divide both of these numbers by 8 to get the answer. So if you take 38 divided by 8, you're going to end up with 4.75. So it's going to cost $4.75 per 1 hour. Okay, $4.75 per hour. All right, so that's what we have to do since we're getting it per hour on there. That's how you solve that one. Okay, so if we're looking at B, 10B, it says Elsa runs 5 miles in 32 minutes. So now, again, this is where we're going to see where's the critical thing that we're looking for. How many miles does she run per minute? Okay, so we need to get this, the minutes down to 1. Okay, the miles are what we're going to figure out how much it is per 1 minute. Okay, so with that being the case, we're going to have to divide by 32. Obviously, 32 divided by 32 would end up being 1 minute, right? So that's pretty easy. So to get the other one, we're going to have to do 5. Let me pull up my calculator here quick. We have to do 5 divided by 32, and that's going to be 0.15625. So there we go, 0.15625. Okay, so then it does tell us further in the instructions, if necessary, round your answer to the nearest hundredths. Okay, so that's 2 places to the right of the decimal. All right, so the nearest hundredths would be tenths, then hundredths. At this point, you have to look at the 6. Is 6 5 or above? Yes, it is. So it's going to be 0.1, and then the 5 will become a 6. Okay, and that's going to be how many miles? Okay, so that's how we're going to find that. So it's 0.16 miles per minute for that answer. All right, remember, whatever they're saying per, that's what you have to get down to the number 1. All right, for number 11, it says find the least common multiple of 6 and 15. Okay, so if you put in a calculator, especially if you have the inexpensive calculators, if you put 6 in there and then just put plus 6, that'll give you 12. And then each time you hit equals, it'll just keep adding 6 more each time. So that'll start giving you the multiples of it. So you have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, and it goes on and on. Same thing with this one. If you put 15 plus 15, again, especially in the cheaper calculators, it'll start counting by 15s for you. So it's 15, 30, 45. Basically, with this one here, they're asking us to find the least common multiple of 6 and 15. So what is the lowest multiple that's in common with both of them? Well, there's not a 6 in both. There's not a 12. There's not an 18. There's not a 24. There is a 30 in both, and that is the least common multiple. If we kept going up and up and up, we'd find out that every 30 would be another common multiple, like 30, 60, 90. Okay, so those would be common multiples, but we want the least common multiple, which in this case would be 30. All right, so on this one here, it says Ashley earns $14 each hour. So $14 each hour working part-time at a bookstore. She earns one additional dollar for each book she sells. Okay, so it says let A be the amount in dollars that Ashley earns. Well, if that's the case, the total amount that she earns is going to be the answer. Okay, that's going to be the total. So we're going to put A by itself, and then we're going to figure out what the other side would be. Well, we know that she makes $14 each hour. Okay, so it's going to be $14, okay, plus however many books she sells. Okay, in that situation, we don't know because we know it's $14 an hour, so that's definitely something we can put there. And then we know that it's the number of books she sells, but we don't know how many books she's selling. Sometimes she might sell one, sometimes she might sell five. I don't know. So since we don't know that, that is an unknown, which means we put a variable there. So A, okay, is going to equal how much per hour plus however many books she sells. And that's basically what the equation is. Okay, so the total is A, 14 plus B equals A. All right, so once we have the formula, which is this, we can actually plug numbers in for B and get the ordered pair. And you can see that this line is the B and the vertical line is the A. So if we put 1, the number 1, in for B, okay, so it's going to be 14 plus 1, which would make A 15. If we put 2 in for B, 14 plus 2 would be equal to 16, and so on. If we put 3 in for B, it'd be 17, and so on. So I went ahead and plotted it. So 115 would be means we go over 1 and then up 15, which would put us right there. Okay, the next one, we go over 2 and then up 16, which would put me right there, and then over 3 and up 17. And so basically we can kind of see as we keep doing more and more, okay, if we kept on plotting each one of them, it would look just like that. So it says graph your equation using the axis below. Okay, so there's our information. So here's our plot. Okay, and we're making our plot, and it's not going to go through 0. Okay, because we're not starting at 0. We're starting at 14 because that's how much she gets per hour. If she didn't have an amount per hour and she just made how much she got per book, okay, that would start at 0 and angle up like this. But since we're starting at 14 and going up, then we're going to come through the vertical axis at the number 14. So those are all good pieces of information to get from this, and make sure you get all those notes. So the last one for this section, we're going to evaluate this. A lot of people look at this and say 0.1 squared would just be 0.2. Well, that's not quite right. That's usually the answer that a lot of students give, but you got to be really careful because it's not 0.1 plus 0.1. Okay, it is 0.1 times 0.1. So in this situation, I just kind of rewrote it over here. Okay, so 0.1 times 0.1, if you do 1 times 1, that gives you 1. 1 times 0 will give you 0. And we could utilize this 0 too, but it doesn't really make any sense to do that because you're just going to end up with 0, 0. And then remember, for multiplication, to know where to put the decimal, you just look at how many numbers are to the right of the decimal in your multiplication problem. So there's 2 numbers. There's one here, there's one here that are to the right of the decimal. So you start here where the assumed decimal is, and you move it over 2 places. So the answer for this one is going to be 0.01. And again, a lot of times people will put a 0 right before the decimal just to make sure that you clearly see that there is a decimal in that spot. So just be careful when you have an exponent. Okay, a lot of people like to just kind of add the numbers twice or multiply the 2 times the 1 or something like that. So just be careful on that one. And that's how you complete number 13.